Ladies and gentlemen, the General Catalyst Institute's inaugural summit on U.S. resilience begins now. Please welcome to the stage the founding president of the General Catalyst Institute, Teresa Carlson.
Wow, it's so exciting to see you all here this evening. Thank you so much for coming. Wonderful faces in the audience. We have dozens of founders in the room. We have government leaders, industry leaders. So really pleased to have you for our first inaugural, the Summit on Yes Resilience. So it's interesting because at General Catalyst, we really do think in decades. And I've spent my entire career working in public sector. And in public sector, I love that we have this flywheel where we talk about at General Catalyst how we make these connections between technology, policy, and capital. And that's really what we're bringing together today. And for some of you, I think you all know who General Catalyst is, but in case, we are a global investment and transformation company. We have about 40 billion under management, and we just turned 25 years old. Okay, right? We're 25 years old. And we work with these amazing leading entrepreneurs around the world to drive resilience and create economic opportunity and growth. And the General Catalyst Institute is part of General Catalyst. And Hemant and I founded this last September. So we're about a little more than a year old. And the idea was to make that flywheel really work, to have that intersection between our founders, lawmakers, government leaders, and public policy to create the most effective policies around the world to allow these companies to thrive and grow, but to really create resilience. So that's what this is about. And when we talk about what is resilience, well, when we think about it at General Catalyst Institute, we are living in an era of extraordinary possibility. I always like to think of the cup half full, not half empty. And I do believe that we're living in a time where these technology and global shifts and human ingenuity are creating and reshaping these phenomenal opportunities that make our world even a greater possibility with technology. And we don't want to be reactionary in this, but through intentional transformation, America's resilience is our capacity to adapt and strengthen these things together. So in areas like healthcare, manufacturing, defense, AI, applied AI, financial services, these are all really critical parts of any core global economy. So why are we here today? We're here today and we've mixed it up. I'm seeing even one of our healthcare CEOs over here from WellSpan. This summit is really we've set it up to activate the transformation flywheel of aligning the builders, the policymakers, and this long-term capital thinking around a shared mission. So when we leave here today, what we hope is what success looks like, that we will have created new ideas and opportunities together to really drive that resilience. And by the way, we believe this is not just for General Catalyst, it's for all of the founders at all of these industry levels so that we can all rise to the top. And so far, I will say, it's been really amazing to work with this administration because they are really driving and seeing the possibilities around the reshaping of technology with AI. So I want to welcome everybody today. I hope you enjoy. We have an amazing lineup of presenters. It's going to go really fast. We're trying to make it really fast. And after this, we have a reception. So thank you again for coming. And now we'll jump to our first panel.
Please welcome to the stage House Majority Whip Tom Emmer and Eric Glyman, co-founder and CEO of RAMP, in conversation with Teresa Carlson.
Well, thank you both so much for being here today. You both, well, you've had an exciting day and an exciting day ahead. And Eric, you've had an exciting day already. So we'll talk about that in just a minute. But of course, we have here with us our House Majority Whip Leader, Republican Tom Emmer. Thank you again. And Eric Glyman, who is the co-founder and CEO of RAMP, which is one of the companies that we've invested in. And I'm also to say I'm a happy user at General Catalyst. So Eric, thank you. And it's all about AI. You can ask my team. They get these little dings saying, put your expenses in. So it gives you a lot of business insights. But we are here, we're going to talk about empowering the economy with AI-enabled fintech. So, Congressman, again, you have been really busy, and we were talking backstage. I really love your positive attitude. I love your outlook on who we are in America and what we're doing. And you've really been leading in a lot of issues ranging from financial services transformation and innovation, national security, how to make government more efficient operationally. And so as you look across government, what excites you about what can make America stronger and resilient?
Well, everybody in this room, for starters, and this young guy sitting next to me that's making new things every day, that's what excites me. And what excites me right now is that we have a user-friendly administration. It was interesting, back in the first Trump administration, we were pushing on the financial services side all kinds of innovation stuff that was being, we had friends in the administration, but it was being blocked. Thought it'd be better under the last administration. It was worse. We got people like Gary Gensler who were doing this enforcement by decree. I mean, he said he had an open door, but it was usually before you got the lawsuit and you had to defend yourself after you gave the idea. Now we've got Donald Trump, who came into office and said, we are not only going to be the cryptocurrency capital of the world, we're going to lead in innovation when it comes to AI and technology. I mean, within his first 3 days, he issued an executive order setting out what he wanted to see when it comes to AI, which is why David Sachs, and I understand you're going to have Patrick Witt here tonight at some point, who has replaced Bo Hines in that group. David Sachs and the White House put out an AI action plan at the end of July. I mean, that's the exciting part, is that we are going to lead again. We're not going to sit back. We're not going to try and frustrate the entrepreneurs out there. And just know, you're going to hear the debate between those who, I'm so scared of what's in that dark room behind that door and what's coming next. You know what? There's a lot of us who are truly excited about the opportunities. And Eric and I were just talking about it. The list goes on and on in terms of what AI is going to do for us in terms of government efficiency, in terms of rooting out waste, fraud, and abuse, in terms of financial stuff and manufacturing, and healthcare is the one that we got really excited about talking about backstage. So I'm a little excited. I love all
that.
of it.
Well, and I love that you're positive about it, and I think it demonstrates how the government is trying to move things forward, so thank you for that. So, Eric, I'm not, like, the team was coming up saying, Eric's had a big day, and I was like, shoot, I haven't gotten to watch all the news yet. But talk a little bit what you raised a new round, you've been traveling around. Talk about your new fundraise, and then I'd also like you to answer, how'd you come up with this idea of RAMP? What were you trying to solve for?
Look, thank you so much for having me. This is actually, for me, the highlight. I'm so excited to be here and grateful that all of you are joining me. And earlier, we had the pleasure of announcing we raised $300 million at a $32 billion valuation.
Wow.
I feel very lucky. We've come a long way. We have a long way to go, and we're grateful to the GC team for all your support. But look, we have a very simple mission. We believe that time is money, and our purpose is to help businesses spend less and grow faster. We started the company about 6 years ago with the goal and the belief that every dollar not spent on waste is a dollar that can be reinvented to growth. And you flash forward to today, we support over 50,000 businesses, from early stage companies to global leaders like CBRE, the Boys and Girls Clubs of America, farms, healthcare systems, you name it. The average company that uses RAMP reduces their expenses by 5% per year, and the median one grows revenue, grew the revenue by 12% last year, which is significantly higher than the U.S. national average. And the reason we started this, if you really go back to how many financial products are oriented, Their goal is take credit cards, spend more money, earn points, multipliers, these types of things. Every small business owner I ever met wanted to spend less and want to be more profitable. So we said, what if we aligned incentives? A dollar not spent on a subscription you're not using is 100 times better than getting a penny back on that purchase. And so this was kind of the goal. How do we align incentives, help people get more out of their dollars and hours?
And you're really utilizing artificial intelligence in doing this. It really gives companies insights and information, and it learns, right, throughout the process. So these are the kind of tools that sometimes humans don't always pick up. So we're going to come back to that in just a little bit. So, Congressman, you have been a big proponent around the U.S. Being a leader in AI and what it can do. So when you talk to your colleagues, talk to your constituents, what are some of the key areas that you believe AI can help us with, both at the government level, I'll say the government and the local level, with your constituents?
Well, first off, constituents and my colleagues, two different things. I mean, two different constituencies, right? My colleagues, as the whip, it's a different conversation than people at home. The conversations you're having inside the halls of Congress are helping people overcome their fears, right? They're being told, oh, AI is going to destroy the workforce, where people are going to lose their job. No, you got to start putting the information together to show them that it's going to increase productivity. I love what Eric just said, $1 saved here. This is the split that you typically see, and it's more complicated than this, but I'm going to dumb it down for my own benefit, is you typically see the one side that is arguing that this is going to expand opportunities, going to create new and different jobs, but there'll be a lot of jobs, right? You have the other side that's like, well, no, this is going to take away jobs. Why are they saying that? Because it's that old thing about, well, you are the wealthy business owner that is taking every dollar out of the business to benefit yourself. People who think that way don't understand how actual entrepreneurs and innovators work in this country. They take that dollar, like Eric said earlier, and they plow it right back into the process. I mean, I didn't run anything like this, but when I was running my own business, I remember when I first started it, every Friday would come along and everybody get a paycheck, and I'd say, great, 2 more working days till Monday, right? It's like, but that's the way it works. And what you're doing with AI for my constituents, potentially, imagine the cures we're going to have in the healthcare space. You're going to cure cancer. You're going to cure diabetes. You're going to have answers for things like Alzheimer's, potentially. Things that we are currently just touching. AI gives us the opportunity to maybe accelerate that at warp speed. Think about government itself, whether it's federal, state, local. The efficiencies, okay, so you want a new data center right now. You got to go through layers and layers of bureaucracy to get the permitting necessary to even start the project. AI could do that in a nanosecond. Imagine what that does to productivity. Imagine what that does to growing opportunities within America's labor market. I think the sky's the limit, and that's why you've got to make sure that we lead. The other thing we were talking about backstage is that only in America. I mean, the Chinese have some incredibly brilliant people, but the culture is not built for this type of innovation, this type of risk-taking, this type of creation, only in America and with people like Eric and all the people in this room.
You're making a really good point. One of the things I've learned just in my time at General Catalyst, our investors talk about, it'd be interesting to hear if Eric feels this way, sometimes where a founder starts is not where they end, because they iterate. They're really smart. They think through how do they solve these problems, and they iterate on these problems, and that's a very American thing. Americans, we don't like to fail, but we don't mind trying it because we think that failure is just another opportunity to pick ourselves back up. Eric, one of the things I thought you could share is with RAMP and the tool, what are some of the things the audience might not know about a tool like that and the changes? Because I see it in our day-to-day use, but what would the average company or individual not really know about what RAMP does?
Yeah. So first, maybe for folks who haven't used it, to get some sense of where Ramp operates. Many people in this room, probably the worst day of your month, if I had to guess what it is, it's maybe doing expenses. It's this very silly and low-value task. You spend for a $5 cup of coffee, and then you get a physical receipt. You go on some tool. You have to key everything in manually. It goes to your boss. Your boss reviews, why did they buy this $5 cup of coffee? After an hour of work, this thing is finally done. Where's the value in that? With Ramp, many people know this in the gateway is you tap a card, and at the moment it's tapped, the card knows your expense policy. Is it in or out? So it has this kind of intelligence. Next, once the money is spent, it has knowledge of, how is this approved? What was all the context, all the data behind it, and it can start to label the transaction. Then it has the ability to reason through, was this a good use of funds or not, and can recommend next month, do you allocate things here or there? You flash forward to the scale we're operating at. Last month, our customers spent over $10 billion through cards, bill payments, procurement, everything through the platform. And what these customers, the benefits they're realizing is automated accounting. Over 300 million transactions are categorized every single year correctly, whereas for most teams, there's days and days and days of work at every company just to go and categorize these transactions. And so not only are books done faster and more accurately, are customers spending less, but I think that the big unlock, if you really look at most companies, there's so much just weight of the bureaucracy, the weight of running a business, especially for small business owners, is very, very high. And as you start to do that work for people, actually people can do the interesting work, deciding where do we allocate the next dollar, how do we sell to the next customer, how do we go and create new products. And so I think sometimes it's easy to conflate this as a simple product and forget actually when you can do and automate the small things, it frees you up to be more productive. And I think just about where we are in this summit on resilience. You take the average American business, they have a profit margin of 8%. Mathematically, a dollar saved is not a dollar earned. A dollar saved of cost wrung out is equivalent to 12 more dollars earned. And if you can make American businesses, the backbone of this country, run more efficiently, it means a whole lot of good things. More dollars to employ people, more taxes to fund great uses, and important things to invest in. And so I think it's important to be talking about money at the top of the funnel, because as the top of the summit, it's important in unlocking what we can do next.
It's extremely important, and it sounds like the tool's affordable, that all types of businesses can use it at every level, from a small business to enterprise. Sounds like something government should be using too. So maybe we can work on that next. I love that. And then one just quick question: how much of the coding and development for this tool was used? Was it AI driven?
So we measure the productivity of our team very, very closely. So first, the average amount of code written by an engineer at Ramp is increasing by about 50% every 5 months.
Wow.
Over the first 5 months of the year, we shipped more features than we did in the entirety of the previous year. And
I just want to pause on that for a minute. This is really amazing. This statistic just demonstrates how rapid technology is evolving. This is, when I was at Microsoft from 2000, 2010, if we released one product every 3 years, that was a big deal. Think about what he just said in terms of productivity. We are at a staggering rate increasing our ability to roll out new technology. It's why we need government to be able to set the right policies to make sure that America stays ahead.
Well, and Teresa, on that point, what you were saying to me backstage is we thought it was going to slow down, but it's just the opposite.
So with that, Congressman, let me ask you, let's I want to share with the audience a little bit about how you see fintech, financial services, really evolving. And what does the future of that infrastructure look like in the U.S.?
Well, I think we were talking about this a little bit. This is such a powerful, disruptive, destructive technology, potentially, to the existing ecosystem, that the job of Congress is not to stand in the way. The job of Congress is to make sure that we put some light guardrails where we need to protect, when it comes to now our financial system, protect the legacy two-tier banking system that we have, but not protect it at the expense of 21st century finance. Protect it, from my perspective, to allow it to evolve. If you do not want to evolve into the 21st century, then you will be the Sears and Roebuck of the 21st century. This thing, as Eric has just described his own experience, is moving faster and faster every day, every week, every month. For government to think that we're going to stop it, the Chinese couldn't turn off the crypto experience when they tried to, the mining. We're not going to stop it in this country. We need to embrace it. We need to own it. We need to make sure that this cowboy, cowgirl spirit, entrepreneurial spirit that is the United States of America is given the opportunity to blossom, because we can do it like nobody else. But we got to make sure that you protect what you have and give them a chance to evolve. It's just going to make it more efficient. What you're talking about is, I don't need 20 people in the back room anymore going through expense reports and trying to figure out if this is legitimate and how I would code it. No, that's done instantly. And now those 20 people, I can put them to work selling stuff. I can put them to work creating the next new great thing. That's the future, and that's why we got to lean in Congress. I'm excited, Teresa, because we weren't doing it before. You already see the progress. It's not just the president coming in and issuing his executive order that we're going to lead in AI and we're going to do these things in the financial space, and then setting up the digital group that with David Sachs and Patrick, who you're going to talk to, all these guys. We've already seen genius come through a guidelines for stable coins. Look, the Senate hadn't done anything in 5 years, and they punched that thing out. This is huge innovation creation space where now we have some guidelines. We've got the Clarity Act that is currently going to be marked up in both the Senate Ag Committee and the Senate Banking Committee. They're using 5, 6, 7 years of institutional knowledge that has been created on the House side as the base text, and they're building off of it, which is great. We get that done before the end of the year, it'd be fantastic, because you've got rules of the road in the stablecoin area. You don't want to have chaos on the other side for all the other digital products. But that gets done, you're just going to continue to see what Eric's described in his own business. It is going to grow exponentially, and it is the future. The future's arrived.
It is, and I will say, even around the world now, we are seeing other countries starting to adopt. You're probably seeing, Eric, as you're doing business. So we're at time, but 10 seconds or less. If there is one thing you would ask the audience to go do after this to help make sure that America stays resilient, what would it be? Congressman, we'll start with you.
Well, I want to make sure that everybody in this room that is creating and innovating in the AI space or related to the AI space, keep in mind this is 10 seconds. This is one of the president's main initiatives. Please answer the questions that you know my colleagues are going to be asking. What does this mean to the future of American opportunities for everyone? I think that's the most important thing. Productivity is going to go way up. Efficiencies are going to become greater and greater. But how does that translate into more and more opportunities for every and all Americans?
Eric?
If you are a business owner, do yourself a favor and save 5% on your expenses at ramp. No, I'm kidding. But no, I think for folks, especially setting policy here, I think it's easy to, at first blush, be sometimes like worried or wonder what it might bring. And then you use these tools, it makes it easier to do your job, makes things more fun and interesting, and so just experience it. I think you'll enjoy it.
Well, Congressman Eric, thank you so much. Congratulations. Congressman, keep up the good work. Thank you.
Thank you, Teresa.
Please welcome to the stage Patrick Witt, Executive Director of the President's Council of Advisors for Digital Assets, in conversation with Tammy Haddad, the founder of the Washington AI Network.
Hi, everyone. We're so glad to be here at the Summit on U.S. Resilience, and I have the man behind it, the man with the plan. We can call you that now, Patrick Witt. So, Patrick, you're the point person for President Trump's digital assets. Okay, so how are you going to make the United States the crypto capital of the world? What's your plan?
Well, the good news is we're building off of a lot of great progress that's already been made. So my predecessor in the role, Bo Hines, our boss, David Sachs, consistent in the role. We've already put a lot of wins on the board with some of the executive orders that were signed by the president early on, with the Genius Act that's been passed and is now fully into implementation over at the Treasury Department, and then the market structure bill that we're working on getting across the finish line. The other thing I would call out is, when folks ask kind of like what comes next or what are we working on, we always point back to the working group, the President's Working Group report on digital assets, which is a tome. It's quite thick and it's got a playbook for the future. So we make sure that we touch base with all the agencies, slightly disrupted by the shutdown, but now back in gear fully to make sure that they're moving out on all those recommendations in the report.
Well, Congressman Emmer mentioned you. I don't know if you heard that. I don't know if that applies more pressure than you get from just being at the White House. But how are you going to get Congress on board with the market structure legislation? I mean, how are you going to get that done?
Well, lately we've seen a lot of progress with it. During the shutdown, it was a bit of a perverse silver lining where a lot of the competing priorities and meetings that would have popped up fell away, and so we had great engagement directly with members, with their staffs, both Senate Banking, Senate Ag. If you all saw last week, Senate Ag put out their draft, which had both, Chairman Bozeman, but also Senator Booker's name on it. So we view that as a major step forward to getting bipartisan legislation. It has to be at the end of the day, but it's not just because it's a raw number count. We got to get to 60. This is a technology that there are Democrats that recognize. There's no need to be anti-progress, anti-innovation on this. Crypto, unfortunately, became a very partisan issue, but we don't view it that way. We view it.
Well, who's standing in your way? Or what is standing in your way?
I think there are a number of folks on the left that still have that, legacy Gary Gensler mindset, Senator Warren in particular. But the good news is, there's a cadre of 12 Democrats that signed on to the market structure principles with whom we are engaging regularly. Some of them are on Senate Banking, some on Senate Ag, some are off committees, but they are getting together regularly with Senate Banking, Senate Ag staff. We're going to meet with them tomorrow, again, to drive this forward. So we're ticking down the list of issues, and I'm very encouraged by the progress.
Okay. How does it play into making sure that the U.S. is the leader globally with payment rails of the future?
Payment rails specifically, so following on from Genius, we view it as...
Yes, we're following from Genius, aren't we? Is everyone on board with that? Yeah.
We view it very much as the United States had a dominant position in the financial markets, a leadership position in financial markets of the past, if you will, or traditional finance. If we cede our leadership position in the financial infrastructure that's being built for the future, that is a major failure and has implications not just for financial markets, but it has implications for our national defense, our national security on down the line. I have the benefit of, when I came into the administration on January 20th, I actually came in over at the Pentagon. And in my other hat, as of today, now the deputy director, I was the acting director until today of the Office of Strategic Capital, I've been privy to a number of conversations around how national security leaders are approaching the issue of economic security as national security. And our privileged position within financial markets, I think, directly relates to that. So being able to reinforce, when we're having conversations on the Hill about crypto, it's not obvious always to senators how this then relates back to our overall prosperity, and that includes not just economics and GDP, but also our national security. And so we view this as an opportunity to really boost both.
Well, that's why I wanted to ask you about China. How is this going to help the U.S. stay ahead with China?
Well, I think you've seen some conflicting, but otherwise trending in the wrong direction actions from China. Ultimately, our systems are not compatible, right? We are pro-freedom, we're pro-individual liberty. The CCP is not, and one of the promises of blockchain technology and cryptocurrencies is that more pro-individual liberties, the freedom to spend your money, to transfer your money how you want. That's not really, that doesn't reconcile well with a very authoritarian model. And so it allows us, again, if we do this right, to promote American values through an open financial system that is efficient, that allows people to participate, democratizes access to the US dollar and to US financial markets. So there's a lot that we can deliver here beyond just, again, GDP boost.
So how are you going to make these changes and the goal you have? I mean, this conference is about U.S. resilience. How are you going to make it permanent?
Well, it starts with hard coding it into law, as we saw, just recently. It wasn't that long ago that Gary Gensler was right at the
Gary
SEC.
Gensler is mentioned 3 times already at this conference, right?
The ghost of Gary lives on. But all it would take is one change of administration to potentially turn back the clocks and then be back in the same position where we were, where you had a bunch of I don't want to come up with too pejorative of a term, but non-forward-thinking, policymakers basically strangling an industry and a technology that did not have to be a partisan issue at all. I say sometimes, they kind of handed Republicans and the Trump administration a great gift that we were all too happy to pick up, not just because it was good politics, but it's good policy. They were wrong on both issues. And so, we're doing everything that we can to drive it forward because we believe that this is one of the vectors that the United States is going to win on, in addition to, AI and a number of the other topics that I'm sure are being discussed during this conference.
Okay, so you were a quarterback. Does anyone know what team he was a quarterback for? Didn't you read the speaker bios for Yale, right? Okay, so now you're the crypto quarterback. That's what I was calling you before this interview. Are you using any strategy you learned in football for this job?
That is a good question. Very creative. I've never
Thank
been
you very
asked that
much.
before. Being a quarterback, it's a unique position. As any football player will tell you, it is truly a team sport, one of those sports where you can do nothing on your own. I can imagine going out there and snapping the ball to myself and then immediately getting tackled by 11 large people on the other side of the field. This is a team sport. It starts at the top with President Trump setting the direction. My boss, David Sachs, a visionary leader, doing amazing work, not only on crypto, but also on AI and a number of other, technology issues. People always want to get his opinion on it. And recognizing in other people their particular gifts and talents. So to continue the football metaphor, who's my receiver, who's my running back, who's my lineman, is, I think, a helpful skill in pushing the ball forward.
Team player. Patrick Witt, let's hear it for him. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Please welcome to the stage Congressman Rob Wittman, Vice Chairman of the House Armed Services Committee, and Dino Mavroukas, co-founder and CEO of Saronic, in conversation with Colin Demarest, Axios's Future of Defense reporter.
Hey y'all, I'm Colin. I got Congressman Wittman,
Colin?
Dino from Saronic. We have just shy of 20 minutes, so if you guys are game, I say we jump right into it.
Let's go.
Let's set the stage, start broad here. Gut reaction to Secretary Hegseth's acquisition speech and what that might mean for the idea of national resilience, especially for the defense industrial base.
Well, listen, I'm excited about it. I think the need for acquisition reform now is greater than it's ever been. If you look at being able to innovate, create, make sure that we go to uncrewed systems, smaller platforms, autonomous platforms, things that are expendable, things that are attritable. Listen, we will need the exquisite platforms, but if you look at being able to adjust quickly to the threats around the world, it is going to be those expendable and attritable platforms that give us that flexibility and let us move to where the threat is and adapt to the threat literally on an hour-by-hour basis. And especially, too, what I like about it is it changes the mindset of DoD. The mindset of DoD for years has all been hardware-based. Let's acquire hardware. Let's acquire hardware. Let's take years and years and years to do that. And now it's, no, guess what? The defining moment for Department of Defense is going to be software. How does software define what we can do? That's what's going to create the opportunities there, and that's why I'm excited about what we see coming forward.
Dino, your thoughts as the seller?
Same. I was very excited. So I had the honor to be in the room. If anybody hasn't watched the Secretary's speech, I would encourage you to go do so. For the first 10 minutes or so, he read the speech as if it was his own and talked about how the greatest adversary we face today is actually the bureaucracy within. And then he paused and said, I'm going to let you in on a little secret. These aren't my words. These are verbatim Donald Rumsfeld, September 10th, 2001. If that didn't get you on the edge of your seat, I actually don't know what will. And, he went through very specific changes and laid out everything from, the preference for commercial first solutions to the realignment to PAEs versus PEOs to the definition of defense contractors and others. But to me, the other most exciting part was the fact that he said, we're not going to sleep until these changes are enacted and driven throughout the building. And it's that level of conviction that pushing these changes through, making sure that they flow not just at the high levels, but all the way down throughout the building to the people that are conducting the tests and making the decisions and writing the contracts, that's absolutely critical. We're playing a large part of that. We've been doing things that align with the Secretary's initiatives since we started the company. We've been investing ahead of contract. We've been leveraging internal research and development dollars to build the capabilities that are needed and then just putting solutions in the warfighter's hands, testing, learning, developing, and iterating, and then building at scale, which is critical.
And for both of y'all, how are you thinking about this bigger concept of national resiliency, right? Not just defense, we're talking energy, we're talking manufacturing, workforce, recruiting, all of that put together. Congressman?
Well, listen, timing matters, speed matters. It's a matter of getting the technology, the things that we do best, into operation quickly. We've been used to, through the years, not having anybody that's even close to us in competition. So time was our friend. We could afford to do things deliberately and slowly. What we see around the world today is time is not our friend. We see our adversaries, we see our near-peer adversaries that not only have caught up to us, but they've surpassed us. And they've done that because they've simplified their systems. They've made bureaucracy the antithesis to getting things done. We have made it the foundation of getting things done. We know that process today shouldn't be job one. It should be outcomes. It should be mission outcomes. What are we doing to make sure we do that? So the whole mindset of what happens in the United States has to change. The business sector has come along and done that much faster than the Department of Defense or Department of any of the areas, Department of Energy, you name it. Those individuals now, I think, finally see that timing is everything, and getting things done quickly matters. In the words of the immortal Jerry Reed, we have a long ways to go and a short time to get there. That is really the key where we have to be today. And it's difficult in a large bureaucracy. It's even difficult in a large organization. You look at large companies today. Sometimes speed is a challenge because there's so many steps to have to go through. That's why this year, between what's happening in the Pentagon, between the SPEED Act on the House side, the Forged Act on the Senate side, and what will come out of that in conference committee is going to be transformational change as it relates to acquisition. I've never seen anything at this level of magnitude, the things that need to happen. They're focused on both governance, to be able to make sure governance is a secondary thought and mission outcomes is the primary thought. Those are going to be things that'll fundamentally change how things happen within the Department of Defense and get us to the point where we're actually putting capability in the hands of the warfighter, and that capability can be different tomorrow based on what we can do to update software. We can take off-the-shelf technology and make it work tomorrow. I mean, those are the things that have to happen. When you talk to the warfighters out there, they are as creative and imaginative as anybody in the fighting force has ever been. You give them the tools, and they're pretty resilient. They'll take the tool, and then they'll try it today, and they'll come back to you tomorrow and say, well, if we programmed it to do this, this, and this, it would be that much better. That's the world that we live in. It's the world that exists everywhere else except DOD. Now it has to be the world DOD lives in.
Before I jump over to you, Dino, I just wanted to follow up real quick. We just came out of a government shutdown. Yeah. What does a shutdown, especially of that length and this kind of endless parade of CRs do to speed and then national resilience?
It is incredibly harmful. You cannot stay on track in this nation to get things done with a CR. You know, I go back to a testimony we had before House Armed Services Committee in 2019, when at the time, Secretary of the Navy was asked this question by me. I said, how much did it cost the United States Navy for the shutdown that you just endured? He goes, Rob, for the United States Navy, it cost us $4 billion. He goes, that's not $4 billion that we get to push forward and spend somewhere else. He goes, that's taking $4 billion and putting it in the trash can and burning it. That's how harmful CRs are. That's what it stops us from doing. You look at the time that we've been shut down, the 40-plus days. Guess what? That's 40-plus days they will never get back. It's 40-plus days that the Chinese have to continue to run to get in front of us. If you were in a race, you would never stop for 40 days and expect to win the race. We've got to have the same mindset. That's where we are today.
Dino, you were nodding. Your thoughts on maybe this race with China and what this all means for the U.S.?
Yeah, and when we look at reindustrialization in this country and building things again, and I'm going to say this and then I'll tell a story and I'll kind of give the story of Saronic, where we're at today and then what we're doing. But make no mistake, like, it can absolutely be done. Right? We have a unique moment in history where the national will is supporting this. You have private capital flowing into this space like it has never been done before. And you have a group of founders and companies that are really, really passionate about building what this country needs. So, sir, I'll tell this story. I hope it's okay. Please. But two and a half years ago, I had the privilege of hosting the congressman at our office in Austin, Texas. We had just started. We had bought an $800 raft on Amazon. And then our engineers took that $800 plastic raft, put $30,000 of computers and sensors and stuff in it, and then cargo strapped it on top of a garbage can. This is what I had to show the congressman, how we were redefining the Navy. To say I was more than just a little bit nervous before that meeting of how I was going to sell this.
You impressed him with the barbecue.
That's
probably.
right.
But no, it was the speed and scale at which we were moving at. Yeah. It wasn't just, oh, okay, here's a raft sitting on top of a garbage can. It was, oh, come look at the simulation environment that we've built out and all the software that we built out while we're standing up this production line that then is going to build hundreds or thousands of these units. And we've taken that plastic raft 2.5 years ago to now we're building a 180-foot autonomous ship at our shipyard in Franklin, Louisiana. We have over 1,000 employees. We're focused on changing the entire shipbuilding industry in this country. And when you talk about running the race with China, the Chinese can outbuild the U.S. 230 to 1. You have to rethink the problem from a complete first principles approach. You can't go in and say, we're going to make shipbuilding 100% more efficient, 200% more efficient. That gets you 230 to 2. So you have to rethink the problem from the ground up. You have to leverage autonomy, and you have to build at scale extremely quickly.
What's the status on the 180-footers, Marauders, correct?
Yes. So we acquired a shipyard in Franklin, Louisiana. not a legacy shipyard. This shipyard was closing down. So one of the things we think about is not how do we acquire legacy yards and make them more efficient. It's how do we bring brand new capacity online in this country in a way that wouldn't exist otherwise. So we acquired this shipyard that was closing down. They were laying off 100% of their entire workforce. We stepped in within 40 days. We closed the acquisition, retained 100% of the workforce, tripled the workforce within 90 days, laid our first weld on June 24th of this year, and that ship is going to be in the water by the end of the year. So that's
First Marauder.
First Marauder. So thank you. It's actually incredible. I don't say this exaggerating at all. I believe it's the fastest ship built in this country since World War II, and that is our first ship. We're already seeing production efficiency gains from ship 1 to ship 2, and we're scaling that into much, much more shipbuilding production.
Congressman, if you were a school teacher, what would you give shipbuilding in the U.S. a letter grade?
Wow, I tell you.
I think the question is pre-ceronic, sir.
That's that's right. That's right. Well, I would say the report I would send home to the parents is needs lots of improvement. As far as shipbuilding grade, I would say C-. Listen, I think the yards want to do the right thing. The challenge is that there are a lot of things that have to change in how we develop workforce. We're in a very different environment post-COVID, so workforce becomes a tremendously big challenge for the industry. How do we get workforce? How do we make sure, too, that we're looking different ways to construct ships? Today we have giant shipyards, tens of thousands of workers there, which is fine, but we have turned the corner in how shipbuilding takes place. We do build ships by modules. The challenge is you don't have to build the modules all in one place. So the question is how do we get other elements of shipbuilding skills into this place? Especially ship repair, because ship repair happens on a roller coaster ride. So the yards are full of ships for 2 or 3 years, and then all that work gets finished, and then you look at it and go, where did all the ships go? The yards are empty. And we have workforce there that ends up getting laid off. Why are we laying off shipyard workers? It doesn't make sense. So the question is how do we utilize the full workforce element, the full geographic footprint there? How do we do things not only there, but also in our public yards? Our public yards have so much unused capacity, and especially old capacity that has to be modernized. So we could do a lot of things to catch up. We have to massively invest in workforce and in capabilities there to use what we have to a much, much better extent than we do right now. We do a horrible job of using what is really a pretty significant workforce and significant shipbuilding / repair footprint because we do things very inefficiently. And again, it's more about process than it is about outcomes.
Is there a case to lean on South Korea, Japan, the number 2s and number 3s in the world, to do these modules, to do these repairs?
Yes, listen, I don't think that we need to be manufacturing in their countries. I think having this homebound is going to be key. But you look at some of the partnerships that are unfolding now with places like HII, Philly Shipyard being purchased. The answer is yes. These countries understand the process of shipbuilding, understand how do you get materials in place, how do you make sure you have a full supply chain ready to go, that there aren't hiccups in the supply chain. There are a lot of things that we can learn from them. We want to make sure that we are repeating those best practices. We want to make sure we combine, our engineering expertise with their engineering expertise, with their process expertise. And I think in doing that, yes, we can make monumental steps forward with shipbuilding. But as Dino said, the distance we have to go to make up with the Chinese is pretty gigantic. So the challenge is the way we close that gap quickly isn't just through workforce, isn't just through geographic footprint on shipbuilding. It's, as Dino said, it's how do we change the process? How do we make sure that we use the conventional skills that we have, but also, look at other ways to do it. Advanced manufacturing, additive manufacturing is going to be key. There's a lot of systems on ships that we need to be using that for. Instead of waiting for a casting to be made someplace and waiting 5 months for that, a digital printer can do the same thing in 48 hours. I mean, those are the things that we can really close the gap. And right now, we have an advantage over the Chinese in many of those additive manufacturing processes using these advanced metals, exotic metals that the Chinese don't have. So let's use the advantage that we have now to close the gap. We won't get it all the way closed, but we sure can get a lot of the way there in order to make sure we're keeping up with the Chinese.
And so, as we're wrapping up here, both of you have talked extensively about AI, automation, that sort of thing. What does military deterrence, U.S. deterrence, look like in an age of AI when it is in everything from cyber to drones to missile defense, that sort of thing, drone boats? You first.
I'll give a couple fancy buzzwords, and then we'll get into kind of, again, what that means. It's attritable autonomous platforms that can be produced very, very economically, but in very, very large quantities. What that means in our world in building ships is, how do we actually produce ships faster and at a cheaper price point than a comparable destroyer, which takes 6 to 8 years to build, which costs $2 billion starting off at, and also carries 500 people, right? One of the things we don't talk enough about is we can sit here and go through the mathematical realities of why we need to leverage autonomy. But the reality is we're at a point in time, a moment in history, where we now actually have these capabilities that haven't existed before, which means we have the responsibility to employ them and keep people out of harm's way, right? We should never send a person into combat if we can send a robot instead.
Does that mean less sailors and Marines, or does that just mean augmented?
It means the sailors and Marines get to stay safe, out of the weapons engagement zone. There's always going to be people controlling the systems. This is not Terminator type, robots are deciding when we go to war. And at the end of the day, warfare will always have a human component to it, right? If the Chinese want to invade Taiwan, at some point in time, they have to stand on that island and plant their flag and control the people. Otherwise, they haven't succeeded, right? So it's, how do you take people out of the equation as much as possible to keep them safe?
Congressman, you get the final word.
Yeah, listen, I think Dino's exactly right. What we're looking at today is a world that's very complex, and the Chinese every day make a calculation, and that is, could they prevail today if they decided to try to retake Taiwan? Our effort is to make sure we deter them. We want to make sure Xi Jinping wakes up every morning and goes, no, not today. And as Dino talked about, this really is a math problem. As many nights as I wake up with nightmares about the calculus problem that I didn't get, this really is about solving for the unknown. And when the Chinese are forced to solve for the unknown, guess what? It makes them stop. And the greatest unknown that they would have to solve for is a massive, autonomous, uncrewed force that they can't predict where it's going to be, what the magnitude of the threat is, and how to counter that threat. That is our biggest advantage, and we still have a leg up there. So the question is how do we keep at the pace we're on, and that is not walking but running, and then sprinting to make sure that we stay ahead of the Chinese. This is a competition. It's a competition where the Chinese are willing to do anything to prevail. Listen, here's the deal. They are willing to lie, cheat, and steal to do that. I mean, they have no boundaries. They are willing to take your technology, put it in place, reproduce it, if anything they can do to get an advantage. So let's call that for what it is, but let's understand that that's how they're going to operate. We are not going to operate that way. But where we do have an advantage is we are the best innovators and creators in the world. We don't have to steal stuff. We can create it ourselves. We need to do a better job of protecting it. But when we do that, our technology will let us prevail. Our technology will let us create that calculus problem for the Chinese, where solving for the unknown makes them so uncomfortable they go, no, not today. That's where we are.
That's the last word. Thank you guys for your insights, and thanks for hanging out with us.
Please welcome to the stage James Proud, the founder and CEO of Substrate, in conversation with Paul Kwan, Managing Director at General Catalyst.
Thanks, James, for joining us. 3 weeks ago, you announced your company's substrate to the world. It was front page news, bringing advanced semiconductor manufacturing back to America, something that people didn't think could happen. This is your first public speaking engagement since then, so thank you for making the time to come chat with us. You know, I've been in Silicon Valley for a really long time, and I've really not worked with as patriotic an American founder as you, to be honest. And so what really motivates you to take on what some would say is sort of the Manhattan Project of our time to bring semiconductors back to America?
Well, thank you for having me. General Catalyst, you guys deserve huge credit for backing us really the earliest of moments. I was actually looking back today when I first met Hemant. We both moved to the Bay Area at a similar time, so it's like 12 years, and then with you, when you were back at Morgan Stanley, 11 years, and so when we were starting the company, the first call really was to you. And so I appreciate being here for the inaugural summit. So despite the British accent, I only have an American passport and citizenship, and I do love this country very dearly. And when looking at the sort of like advanced semiconductor problem, I really sort of started thinking about this about 8 years ago. And this is when you and I were spending a bunch of time in my sort of wilderness years. And because I became very focused on US-China technology competition. And I went down and I actually met the Anduril team when there were 12 people in a sort of shack in Orange County. And I was like, all right, I think these guys have the defense thing solved. And then Saronic and everyone else, like, okay, what other problems do we have? And really looking at the advanced semiconductor sort of issue, it seemed a really interesting problem where we're told, on one hand, if we don't figure this out, we could face destruction of our economy. And this was back in like 2018, 2019. Fast forward to today, like basically the entirety of US GDP growth is on the back of semiconductors. But then on the other hand, we're told it's an impossible problem to solve, trillions of dollars, it's going to take decades, don't look here. And so I took that as a challenge, and I was like, okay, let's look here. And when you really sort of trace back the history of advanced semiconductors, it's a completely American history. The fact that today we find ourselves with basically foreign monopolies that control the key choke points here, I see as sort of ahistorical, whether it's the transistor, CMOS, FinFET. I actually believe that one of the co-creators of FinFET is in the audience today. Photolithography, EUV lithography, all of these technologies were invented in the United States. And so the fact that we're not in a position of dominance right now, I think is an aberration. And so it might be hard, it might be impossible to do, but this feels like one of those ones where we have to try.
And so when the news broke, and again, you can look at a number of the articles that cover the progress and proof points you've made in showing in the lab advanced semiconductor manufacturing in America. How is that possible, right? For all the people from industry or for those who've written books about like the challenge, how is it possible that you could get to this point and have that evidence of that? I mean, how does it actually work, James?
Yeah, so to sort of set the stage, sort of where we are, what we want to do. So the sort of core thesis around what we're doing is that the cost of advanced fabs have gotten ridiculously expensive. Like this audience will know, $30 billion a piece, heading to 50. Advanced wafers are over $30,000, heading probably to over $100,000 towards the end of the decade. And really looking at this, like what is driving that cost? And like one of the most core parts of that process of actually making a semiconductor is the art of photolithography. And right now, there's only one way to do it with advanced EUV lithography. Incredible, incredible technology. The machines that do this are some of the most exquisitely engineered things.
It's from ASML.
But these technology choices were made over like well over a decade ago, close to 2 decades ago, and scaled up and into production. And really, like the sort of starting point was, okay, if this one core technology, which we've all been told cannot be replicated, cannot be surpassed, no one can do it, the US can't do it, China can't do it, but if you could you actually have huge cost reductions and complexity reductions? And that's what we've been focused on as sort of one of the core anchor parts of what we're doing. And 3 weeks ago, we went and showed results showing that now, like the United States is also able to print at the very high resolutions, which industry would call high-NA lithography.
In some ways, we talked in the early days, if you had a blank sheet of paper and you wanted to go do advanced lithography and weren't constrained by those prior approaches, what would that look like? And if you look at the composition of your team, without giving away too much of the secret sauce, the kinds of domain expertise, you have some of the original founders from EUV. Maybe just talk a little bit about that so we can get a sense for how you actually have done this work over the last few years.
Yeah, like a lot with what we're doing, like you can often be very nuanced about something or just be very naive. And with a lot of the stuff that we're doing, we're just very naive. And that naivete is, does America have the best science and engineering still in the world? Yes. Do we have the best national labs in the world? Yes. The best private companies? Yes. If you look at the history of semiconductors, it was predominantly 2 American companies, Intel and IBM, who invented everything. So the bet is that we do have the talent to do this. They might just be not in the right sort of singular group going in the same direction. And so we've built a team of a lot of the greatest from US national labs. And these are people who have, like they work at US national labs. They work on very hard and challenging science and engineering projects that if you actually sort of show, hey, your skills can actually be applied in a very rare sector of the sort of private sector, that was actually very compelling for them. And so the team is truly the best physicists and scientists the US has to offer.
Yeah, and so talk about, again, as we scale, there's a lot more to do. What happens, what can be the art of the possible, both the cost, the throughput, the speed advantages, if we can actually, scale up to a lot more to do, but it's actually quite a game changer here in terms of that dimension.
Yeah, so I think there's sort of like 2 ways to look at it. The one is, and I think this is some of the topic of discussion today, like the fear. Like, okay, what if we lose access? Okay, that's dire. We need to avert that. But really, the opportunity, like right now, only really a handful of companies can actually afford to access the most leading edge silicon. That is both a just sheer cost, but also a capacity issue. If we can actually lower that cost and lower the barriers to entry, then I think that we're going to approach towards the end of this decade, like when we look at the progress in these foundational AI models, I think that by the end of the decade, they're going to be as good, if not probably better, at designing chips than humans. Once that happens, then we're no longer even going to be limited on the design side. It's going to be purely on that fabrication side. And so just thinking about that, like right now, the cycles of whether it's a Google or an NVIDIA, they have to plan several years in advance their roadmaps. If we could start to actually cut this down and enable, I think, a sort of mass proliferation of
what's sort of
silicon.
the cost dimensionality for like a substrate-looking fab and a substrate wafer versus next generation alternatives?
Yeah, so really we're projecting towards the end of this decade when doing those comparisons, and what we see as you sort of map out those advanced wafer costs is they're going to be approaching close to $100,000. Our goal is to be much, much closer to $10,000.
Order of magnitude difference on cost.
That's the goal.
And then what's the path ahead for substrate going forward?
Yeah, so we've shown what we think is some pretty exciting results on our first lithography tools. There's a lot more sort of there, but then these ideas aren't sort of just isolated to lithography. So there's a few other things that we want to build and begin to show the world, but really we need to start breaking ground and building big particle accelerators, building big clean rooms, and so we're sort of going full steam ahead with that. And excited to sort of do site selection and start building hopefully very soon.
So total time elapsed, James, just to give people some context, because you were intentionally stealthy for more than your typical startup.
Yeah.
Just to give some context to the audience, like from T0 to when you actually want to actually, produce things, it's, walk us through that scale.
From when we started the company or from today?
Both.
So we started the company in early 22. It really actually started with so my co-founder is actually my younger brother, and he sort of started as a research assistant of mine. I was like, look at this, look at this, look at this, and then we got to like pretty strong confidence. Okay, we think the physics of this will work. And then we went and actually pulled 2 physicists, and then just sat in a conference room really for 6 months. I know that you and Hemant came and visited us in there. Poor circulation, like hard to breathe. And we sat in there for 6 months until we were like, okay, this can actually really, really work. And that's when we started scaling the team. The past 2 years, we've been building advanced lithography tools, testing them in collaboration with US national labs.
And built a tool in San Francisco.
Oh, yeah. No, in San Francisco, we have advanced lithography tools somewhere in an office somewhere. We've upped our security and keep doing that. But no, really, this could only be possible, I think, in only a handful of countries, and really only sort of the US and China. And it's through that partnership with the Department of Energy and the national labs. Like, I understand how crazy and insane it is. You've got a guy who has no background in the semiconductor industry, like going to a meeting with the...
You didn't go to college either, James.
I didn't go to college. Thank you.
Nor did your brother.
Thank you, Peter Thiel. Going to sort of leadership at the Department of Energy, and they're like, hey, so the hardest thing that you could possibly imagine, we think we can do it, we need to use some of your lasers. And they're like, okay. I don't think many countries in the world you'd even get the meeting, let alone the partnership and collaboration that actually led to this. And so now we've been building these tools and building some other tools, and really the goal is by in 2028, have a clean room, have a facility, and actually be running through production quality wafers.
Did everyone hear that? It took me a while to get that out of James, so I hope you all heard that last comment there. And just working with the new administration, any thoughts and comments there about how that's looking?
I mean, it's been like fantastic so far. I like full credit to several members of the cabinet. Secretary Lutnick, within his first week of being confirmed, spent an hour with us. Like, this is the guy who has all of the $100 billion, $1 trillion companies pitching him on ideas, but he took the time to sit with us because he understood the importance of this and the mission that the president has set with winning the air race and how chips are critical to that. Secretary Wright over at Energy. How's it going with the labs? How do we move faster? What can we do? So the administration has been very, very biased to action, and we feel deep appreciation of that.
Yeah, well, I just want to really thank you for what you do and the team are doing. I think in venture, you have the chance to support people who are doing audaciously crazy things that can change the world. The risk here is very high, but to us, it's necessary and required, and so I'm just thankful for the partnership. I mean, it's this. We have to win this.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot of risk, 100% with what we're doing. But I think the bigger thing now, even if we fail tomorrow, the United States now has the knowledge on how to do this. And just to put this in perspective, there's 9 countries in the world, depending how you count, who have nuclear weapons. There's now 2 countries in the world, including the United States, who know how to do advanced lithography. And so even if we stop tomorrow, our team knows. So like the US now has that skill. Like, we're not going to lose that. And so like, and I think like people have like a level of incredulity with what we're saying and what we want to go and do, which is completely fine, and people like should be skeptical. But what I would say is that we've done this. The wafers don't lie. These are the smallest things that humanity can really go and print. And we've been able to do this with far less resources and time than people thought possible. And so this is like one of those problems where I think that if we don't, as a country, solve this, and we should keep doing everything that we're doing. We should have every overseas supplier, fabrication company build in the United States. But the opportunity and the sort of downside if we don't solve this are both so large that we're at the throw everything against the wall stage. And we see ourselves as like the crazy asymmetric part of that.
That's incredibly well said. Thanks so much, James, for coming and spending time with us.
Thank you.
Please welcome to the stage Dr. Mehmet Oz, the administrator of the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, in conversation with Hemant Taneja, CEO of General Catalyst.
Well dressed. You know, Oprah always sat on this side.
Well,
the host sits here usually. Did you ever notice that?
Well, the media personality is on that side. So, Dr. Oz, we've been chatting about health for the entire year. And I think one thing I actually want to mention to the crowd before we get into it is we're investing in AI in every industry. And healthcare is actually the fastest adopter of AI today. First of all, we need it from a resilience standpoint. And given the pandemic we've gone through, and there's a simple reason for that the workforce in every other industry fights it. They're afraid of it as to what it means for their jobs. But the workforce in healthcare is saying, give it to me, because I'm underwater because of the pandemic. People are burnt out. So in some ways, a lot of the work you're doing today, because timing matters, this sector is actually ripe for AI making a difference. So I want to start with, if you think about the last 10, 11 months for you, you walked in not knowing what to expect. I'd love to just have you take a step back and think about and reflect on how's it going? What have you learned so far? Where do you see the opportunity is in the overall transformation of healthcare, given that you support 160 million Americans and really control a quarter of the budget?
So Hemant, and thank you for having me here tonight. This is the best job I've ever had in my life. And I've had fantastic jobs. I love heart surgery. I would still do it if I had time. I loved hosting the show. Many of the things that I've done, I thought of them as hobbies. They were so seamlessly part of what I wanted to do in my life. But this job was perfect in many, many ways. And I think if I outline them to you, you'll probably think it's a great job. In fact, this is actually a recruitment call. I'm trying to get folks to come into government. And many of you, I'm hoping, will consider joining or send people, or more importantly, your children. Full disclosure, my daughter Zoe co-founded a company that Hemant funded many years ago that has done well. That's not why I came, but I've gotten to know Hemant and the company and understand how they mentor and nurture. And in many ways, that's what this job is about. The primary responsibility of the administrator of CMS is to hire the smartest people on the planet who have talent in our area and make sure they don't kill each other. That's the primary goal. Many of you run businesses, you probably share that belief as well. But it is, within CMS, a particularly important issue because you have a remarkable number of highly functional, very talented people who can do lots of analyses that are difficult to imagine other groups being able to pull off just because they have domain expertise. And I have to admit, before I came into government, and Hemant and I were speaking before I entered, I likened an external opinion about federal employees to the movie Zootopia. Remember the sloth at the DMV? That's what a lot of folks think of when they are confronted with the idea of being a federal employee. These are incredibly highly functional, mission-aligned, patriotic folks who gave up massively good jobs, usually on the outside, and came in. I'll pick on one person, Chris Klump, who started Collective, built $1 billion business, and came into government, gave up everything. His kids are young. That matters because you can't just divest by giving your older adult kids your ownings. You have to actually provide other kinds of structures. Managed to do it, has come in. He has driven, with John Brooks, the most favored nation drug pricing for the president. This is a program that came up because the president was angered, you should be too, by the reality that we spend 3 times more for the exact same drugs, made in the same facilities, put in the same bottles, as other countries are forced to spend on those same products. And so we have negotiated, again, this is voluntary, we have legislative solutions, we have rulemaking, but they tend to be clunky, and don't take a sledgehammer if a chisel will do the job. And having the power to convene of private sector individuals coming together and deciding for themselves how best to manage their business will always, I think, be better if they can do it. And so by going to pharma companies and making a very simple value proposition, we were able to get success. And here it is. Look them in the eyes and say, you went into this business because you care about people. Because you could have done a lot of other things. So at one point, you really did care about the fact that you were able to save lives with remarkable innovations. We need to keep doing that. We don't want to hurt innovation, but we cannot pay 3 times more than everybody else and fund most of the expense of the R&D side. And to the last one, they've said, all right, we got it. You know, we knew one day you guys would wake up and figure out that it wasn't right. You figured it out. We're going to figure it out too, and they do. And there's other examples, prior authorization, where this widely disliked process where you're having this precious discussion in your office with a patient, and that covenant, that temple is disturbed by the long arm of an insurance company reaching in and saying, are you sure they need that biopsy to see if it's cancer? And everyone's in arms, they're waiting weeks to get responses, the doctor's spending 12 hours a week figuring out the prior auth paperwork. The insurance company, by the way, is reciprocating with 12 hours of work from a highly skilled individual. And at the end of it all, most of the time it gets resolved, but it just wastes a lot of time and energy. We'd never run a credit card business that way, right? You wouldn't put built-in, figure out, 3 weeks later if you can afford the coffee or if the vendor's getting paid. And so these are things that we have now gotten insurance companies representing 80% of the American public to voluntarily agree can be addressed by figuring out which of the codes matter, where's the fraud, where's the overuse and abuse, and if you can figure that out, then you can automate it, and in the moment, instantaneously tell folks they're okay. And there's other clever ideas that were always out there that doctors and hospitals were using, it just never became standard. For example, create a gold card system where if you're always doing the right thing and following guidelines, you don't have to do prior authorization. But if you don't get the gold card, and guess what? You want to have the gold card because everybody wants the gold card. And so there are tactics you can use from the market to push these all forward. But all of these work better if you have AI, especially agentic AI, as part of your solution. So of all the things that give me hope in my job, I'd have to point to that as one of the ones that I'm most optimistic about. And Amy Gleason, who's led the tech transformation in the government, she's at USDS, but she's also had a home at CMS. She has built out a network now of over 400 companies like yours who have signed pledges to participate in data sharing, interoperability, truly dealing with the fundamental reality that you want to know who the person is who wants their medical records because the patient owns their medical records. So we have to help figure out who that is and adjudicate that. And we also have to figure out what the provider directory looks like, which doctors practice where, when. Those are things the government should be responsible for organizing. We may not do it, but we should make that a deliverable. That's like making roads that are flat. And then once that's there, create the ecosystem, a healthy one that allows people to race. Think of it as a racetrack, literally. You want the right turf, you want the guardrails, you want the starting gate, the finish line, but then get out of the way. And let private sector folks, like Hemant, you and many of the folks in this room, come up with better ideas to help us adjudicate empowerment of patients, ensure that we incentivize the providers the right way, and also deal with the fraud, waste, and abuse, which we should talk about.
So first of all, I think one thing that's remarkable is just how strong your team is. Amy Gleason, obviously Chris Klump. We had Chris give a keynote at our Health Assurance Summit in Napa. Roxana was there from WellSpan as well. And the thing that was really interesting was how he unpacked the root issues around Medicare, Medicaid cost structures. And it sort of makes you realize the world is not black or white, it's gray, and you have to govern from the gray and make sure you're making the right trade-offs. And that's something that I think your team is doing a remarkable job of, and us and our founders were very excited about engaging. So one thing I want to talk about as we think about U.S. resiliency, it first starts with eliminating fraud. you want to just comment on, we were just talking in the back about just the magnitude of what's going on. You want to just address that real quick?
So fraud is not some small anti-game that a couple bad players are involved in. Think of CMS as a massive hippopotamus with a target on its side. And the harpoons that can take it down are beneficiary numbers, the provider in numbers of doctors, and these are weaponized by oftentimes large international syndicates, criminal organizations, often funded by other countries. So we had a $15 billion bust that resulted, to my knowledge, in no arrests because all the perpetrators were back in Russia or the Baltic states. We stopped most of the money from leaving, but $2.9 billion escaped. A lot of money. There's more durable medical equipment providers in South Florida than McDonald's. In fact, there are 5 times more DME providers in South Florida than McDonald's. Is that the right number of people to give you Foley catheters and knee braces and wheelchairs? And of course, these folks are many times not involved in legitimate business. The owners of these businesses are, small-time, construction workers from Cuba. They're often back in Cuba by the time you go after them. The conspirators just rinse and repeat these models over and over again. It's easier to open a DME business than start a bank account. So we're working with Treasury, Scott Bessent and others, to try to clean this up. DOJ is involved. Kash Patel's first job was a public defender in Miami, where he had to defend these guys. So he's very aware of how, what scumbags they are. And so we're going to go after these folks. Hospice care. There's hospice centers in California, southwest part of the country, that have 5-year survival rates that are pristine. You should all go there if you have incurable disease, because nobody ever dies in these centers, because they sign up healthy people, pull down the money, and they get away with it again and again. So we're not going to allow that, and we are going after these folks in a very aggressive way. And I'll give you a concrete example. Skin substitutes. Do you know what they are? If you have a wound in your body, they'll put a little piece of skin on there. This is a $250 million business. It's helpful for people who have non-healing ulcers. But the prior administration put in place some rules, and this happens sometimes, where it made it much easier for people to create businesses that were, in fact, encouraged to charge more, because doctors get paid 6% of the cost of the product. Well, if the product is, if I'm getting paid 6% of it, and you charge $100, and you charge $1,000, and you charge $10,000, guess which one I use? And so all the money went to the $10,000 providers. We had patients with $1 million bills in nursing homes waiting to pass with millions of dollars of skin grafts on them. And so after a while, it gets dirty enough that you get the resolve up, and there's lots of people in the business who are legitimate. But as I've told many of them, if the neighborhood's that dirty, you don't have much of a choice. You have to napalm it and clean it out, and you have to take draconian action. I'd much rather know about it earlier, never let the money leave the building. And here's the secret that I learned from my friends in banking. Bank managers are not good at fraud. They don't study fraud. They don't want to be in fraud. So guess who's good at fraud? Fraudsters. So they trick the bank managers. Except turns out AI is really good at fraud, making it and catching it. And so they have now cleaned up their businesses using tactics we're now starting to use aggressively. We have a bake-off right now. We are giving a lot of companies in the fraud detection business access to our data, asking them to tell us what they're going to do with it. And we have a bake-off where some of them can get the data and actually see what they can do. And if they can save us enough money, we'll pay them a portion of their savings. But they're using AI frequently because it's able to behave and think the way a fraudster does. And most importantly, we have to act quickly. This is not about having access to all the data. It doesn't matter, because if they're moving faster than you are, you're never going to catch them. The money goes into their accounts, and it's in the Cayman Islands. So for us, it's speed that will deliver. And we're going to take some more drastic action in addition to what I just mentioned in order to clean this business up. But we want to send a very clear shot across the bow of fraudsters. We think they're still going to be involved in fraud. Just go defraud some other part of the U.S. economy. We're not letting you take money from our most vulnerable, the American patients. Thank you.
So when you think about resiliency of the U.S. healthcare sector, it needs to really address affordability, accessibility, and proactive care. Fraud is the first step, which is you need to open up a lot of the waste that enables affordability. Another part is around drug pricing and local supply chains around drugs. Talk a little bit about how you guys are thinking about that. Obviously, biotechnology is now a strategic priority for the nation, so that's something that you guys are also thinking through. How do we really enable those capabilities?
So I went with Governor Youngkin to Charlottesville last month to open the largest API facility in the country. It's about a $4.5 billion facility that AstraZeneca is building to make GLP-1 precursors. And I saw the kind of investment they're making, and they're willing to make it even larger. We have a massive need for national security purposes to onshore generic products and brand products and their precursor agents, the active pharmaceutical ingredients and the key starter materials. This business is completely dominated by China. And if I were you, if I was looking for opportunities, go see what's happening really well in China and see what we can do here better. Because I think this is going to become important strategically for us to address. We have massive patent fraud. We have companies started that can do studies in months that take us years. We're not sure how legitimate they are, but they're done very effectively overseas, and that data is now fed back into the U.S. system and begins to pollute our data, and it also undermines the foundations of the technologies we're seeking to advance in this country. So it's a strategic imperative for us to create long-term and durable incentives to allow folks to make investments. We are well aware that you're here because you need to see a light at the end of the tunnel for your investments, and you also need to be comfortable that the rules aren't going to change mid-course and leave you abandoned. So we want sustained policies, ideally statutory through Congress, but we have rulemaking that's pretty effective as well. But we are open for business, and we cannot address the entire gamut of challenges that are faced in the healthcare system without engaging the private sector. The tech transformation that we touched on briefly is driven by the private sector. We're going to make it easier to play in that space, but it's going to require private sector investments. We're working with insurance companies, pharmaceutical companies. Again, oftentimes you come in with a desire to change the system in ways that aren't comfortable. But folks are willing to do it voluntarily if they think it brings stability to their markets. The pharma sector increased in valuation when we started doing MFNs. I mean, $100 billion have increased in aggregate. Why? Because the market rewards stability. As long as they know we're not going to do things that are harmful to the core creativity of the sector, which the president was adamant about not changing, he just wants fair pricing. Can you be innovative and price fairly? Yeah. Can you innovate your way to profitability? I think so. Can we compete in areas where historically have lagged because we have the ability to use technology in new ways? Yeah. I think the MAHA movement, and I should address this because it's often the elephant in the room, is primarily about one word: curiosity. Now remember, 80% of questions are statements in disguise. We all have been in those conversations. But if you're truly curious and you're courageous enough to act on what you've learned, even if it's inconvenient, then you actually are going to start pushing for some change. It makes no sense for us to spend twice as much as any other country on the planet per capita and have a life expectancy that's falling behind the rest of the world. When I was in medical school, life expectancy in the United States was equal to that of Europe. Now we're 4 years behind. And our life expectancy in some parts of the country, like rural America, is dramatically further behind. So that's why we put $50 billion into the Rural Health Transformation Fund. I know that General Catalyst is participating with states in this, but let me put this in context. We are putting 50% more money into rural America than Medicaid historically spends in rural America. And here's the secret sauce. We do believe that states who know their problems better than we do at the federal level are going to come up with clever ideas to help pharmacists function at the height of their licensure, to get nurses into rural areas and to get them to stay there because they've got fulfilling lives, to get telemedicine from large medical centers taking better care of some specialty issues in rural hospitals. But the real secret sauce is that people begin to innovate and can share their best practices. If we can get rural America to transform how they think about healthcare, those same tactics and insights are going to benefit urban America as well, and everyone in between. And so that's why we want the states out there talking about their ideas, changing best practices. You guys, and you've already done it, please share that when my soliloquy stops. But I think getting companies like yours to be open about your playbook, the game plan that might actually work, because you put a lot of smart people on the project, came up with ideas, don't hide the light. So by spreading the wisdom, we're going to have a lot of programs coming up with better ways. And we already have a large number of big hospitals thinking about ways they could actually participate in helping smaller hospitals as part of their charitable process. Because if you're a nonprofit, right? You're supposed to spend, either pay the taxes or spend your time in kind contributing to the healthcare community. And the leaders of the large hospitals in this country get that message. They're also mission-driven, helps their people to feel focused, to go out there and change that. What have you guys done in the Rural Health Transformation Fund?
Yeah, so first of all, it's been a remarkable collaboration with Abe Sutton and your team, and a lot of the health systems that are our partners, General Catalyst Institute, and our investment team at General Catalyst. And the idea has been to co-create an architecture that gives you access, we talked about this before, it gives you access to urgent care in rural America, has a workforce that can bring care to people, because you don't want to spend the $50 billion in hospitals that'll be bleeding taxpayer money, because it's going to be hard to actually have a traditional hospital model be what's viable. So rethink the workforce, create urgent care clinics, and design it in a way that within a couple hours of driving, you can actually get acute care as well. So we're trying to design that experiment with WellSpan in Pennsylvania. We're trying to do that with Suma in Akron, the system that we acquired. And we have openly sort of shared this playbook with everybody across the country, because this is not about us creating some proprietary advantage. We just think the whole system needs to work. And I love that you analogize that to what we need in inner cities. It's sort of amazing. There's polarization in the country, but people in rural America and inner cities have the exact same challenges. And I think if we solve it in one place, we'll solve it in the other. And we're actually working with, we created a company specifically focused on rural health called Homeward Health. I think Emmer, who's one of the co-founders and president, is in the room. And also we're backers of CityBlock, which is doing this in Medicaid sort of patients in inner cities. And the parallels and the learnings are really incredibly similar as to what we need across the country.
It's well stated, and I think part of this equation is the healthcare provider. And I want to come back to this theme because it's a very important issue in rural America. We literally don't have access to care in a lot of places. So you're a mom, you've got an 11-year-old kid, got a sore throat. You can drive across the state to go to an ER, which is expensive and time-consuming, and not going to be better care than going to your local pharmacy. Remember, 95% of America lives within 5 miles of a pharmacy. So go to your local pharmacy. This pharmacist, who's more than just a pill dispenser, can do a throat swab, telemedicine back the results. They get the prescription for the penicillin if it's positive. The child gets the antibiotics. They're at the drugstore already. They're at home. Mom's at home by 11:02, goes to bed, goes to work the next day. And this is important for a couple reasons. First, we have got to get more providers to want to be providers. I spoke this morning to the AMA. Now, in my job, one of the interesting things is you get up in the morning, there's always something funny happening, but not funny always in a good way, like bad funny, like tragic funny. And so I get up, and Politico has a big article about how the AMA is going to boycott me because of the things I've been doing in the government. And so I go there, and I deliver the talk that I wanted to give in the first place, which is primarily a call to action with the expression of a concern that I've noticed, which is that doctors have lost their mojo. I don't think healers feel like they are running the ship anymore. And the plea that I made was that the ballast of the ship of society are the professionals, the people who actually help run a lot of these organizations. They have got to treat the patient as number one, which doctors do. They've got to step on the shoulders of their compatriots and learn and improve the practice of medicine. They've got to police each other, but they also have a civic responsibility to go out there and tell people what they think we should do. I mean, what do you think about work requirements in Medicaid? Would you just give up more ACA subsidies, or you think there's a better way of doing it? Like, go and tell people. And we have taken doctors for a variety of reasons and made them cogs in the wheel of a healthcare machine that they don't feel honored by. Nurses feel the same. And for that reason, AI plays an opportunity, because the main reason doctors leave is they burn out. They don't like the job anymore, because when everyone goes home, they're doing paperwork for 3 more hours and don't feel respected in that process. And I know we can fix that. We can make the job a better job, and it's not the money. Yes, you have to pay money. Doctor salaries have trended at half the rate of inflation. Hospital incomes have trended at twice the rate of inflation for the last 15 years. Now, that doesn't mean one's better than the other, but you definitely have to make sure the incentives are in the right place. If we do this the right way, we'll have people who want to go into these fields. My son is an intern at Columbia, and I see the challenges to young doctors contemplating a career in a world that doesn't seem to respect them as much. And if we do that, we begin to reduce the caliber of the individuals going to these fields. We should be investing in them, helping them, and I think AI does that. Because you can imagine 6:30 at night, you want to go home and see your kids, and someone comes in with a sore throat with heart failure. What do? Well, you either stay there 4 more hours and work them up, or agentic AI does it for you while you go home, and they do it better than you. They know what insurance will cover what x-ray. They know how to do the throat swab and who can do it. They understand how to get the lab test back to you as quickly as possible. They know the differential diagnosis of what this might be, and they'll deliver you an answer that you can quickly audit, spending 10% of the time you would have otherwise, and that becomes a very plausible narrative by the average doctor. And you know what happens? The doctor goes home, the kids say, why didn't you go to work today? And dad says, I did go to work today. But from now on, I'm coming home to you, and I'm going to go, when I'm done here, spend an hour catching up on 5 hours of work because I've got tools that can help me. They don't cost me everything. And you know who else likes that? The patients, because they have timely care, and they actually prefer talking with a agentic AI system that actually can collect their information in a cohesive way, answer all their questions, but they know there's a doctor behind the system that's going to get involved at the right time to intervene with the only part that's really critical, which is looking at you in the eyes, creating a trusted bond, and delivering critical information with the kinds of compassion that humans can deliver to humans. You know, this is an important point. 50% of our brain, half of our brain is designed to read, for me, Hemant's receptions. We are designed to read the face of the person we're dealing with and watch their subtle little body motions and understand, is he bored, happy, frustrated? Is he going to attack me, run away from me? We're hardwired for that. We'll never replace that. But a lot of the other things we don't have to have hardwiring for, and listening to people when they really need you is important, but listening to them ask the questions you've answered 10 times that day for other patients is not mission critical all the time.
I wish I told him that before, and I would not have made all those investments on Zoom during COVID because didn't really read the people correctly. So we talked about affordability, we talked about accessibility, proactive care, prevention, and you're very big on incentive design to really do that, and there's a lot of innovation sort of in that context. Talk a little bit about just your core philosophy there, and what do you think is working, what are you optimistic about there?
We need to invest in the trenches where the war for health is fought. The reality is we're twice as expensive as everyone else because we're twice as heavy as everybody else. And we have twice as much chronic disease as everybody else. And we have made decisions in our country that socialize the risks of investments and privatize the profits that arise from them. So we have got to be able to right-size the system. And by putting the right incentives in place, I think we can. So within healthcare specifically, I get paid a lot more than I'm a heart surgeon, than a private practitioner taking care of in a general practice. So this year, we took 2.5% from people like me. It's an efficiency issue. I can be much more efficient than I could be 10 years ago because I can build teams to do that. So they should pay me less because I'm much more efficient than I was. A GP taking a pulse of a patient is not more efficient. So we're going to give that money to the general practitioners and primary practice docs so they can actually have a bit more money and pay off their debts and maybe go into the space. I don't know if any one of my sons graduating medical school class from Columbia last year went into general practice, but I don't know any of them. And why don't they go? Because it's an IQ test. You can't pay your bills back. So, you know, you're not going to go into a space or a specialty where you don't have a chance of having some type of sanity of life, but also financial stability. So these are all things that I think we can begin to accommodate. We also have to think very differently about the way we put people at risk. If I'm incentivizing you in business, I can give you options, I can give you upside potential. There's downside too, you can go bankrupt. But in the medical field, we've made that very hard to do. And we put doctors in charge of risks they don't control. So we're trying to fix that with accountable care organizations. Abe Sutton, who you name, just to name check him again, is here. He drives many of these models. The organization he drives is really the R&D of Medicare and Medicaid, created by Congress to allow the clever ideas you all have to at the water cooler get checked out. We have the nimbleness to do those things, but we have to do them at scale automatically. You don't take care of part of a large population usually. So these are ideas that we know can be effective. Part of the challenge for us is to get people to come along. Our biggest enemy, without question, is nihilism. People not thinking we can fix the system. And I am confident, speaking as a person who's in the the organization who probably sees most of it, at least at a holistic level. Secretary Kennedy believes this is the case. Jay Bhattacharya running NIH, Marty McCary running FDA, and most importantly, the president believes deep in our hearts we can fix the problems. Just the most favored nation drug pricing is a good example, and there's others you're going to see that are saving tens of billions of dollars of taxpayer money. Let's reinvest it in things that we know can yield the return to the American people. But I want to give you one number that you probably weren't going to ask me about because you would never have thought of asking it, even as bright as you are. But I want this to be the one number you remember more than any other. So my budget's getting close to $1.8 trillion. It's big. In fact, it's bigger than anybody else's. But people think about health care as an expense, right? We're spending money. But here's the real catch. If I take the average person born in 1964, they're 61 years old right now. On average, they will retire this year. They don't wait till Medicare. They have pensions, they got plans, they're going to retire. Plus, they don't feel well, their back hurts, they don't sleep so well anymore, they put weight on, they want to fix their life, they retire. We can just get that one age group, just the people born in 1964, to work 3 years longer. What is that worth to the U.S. economy? It's worth $1 trillion. $1 trillion. More than half of what I am allowed to spend a year on the entire healthcare budget of government-funded insurance is just from that one age group working a little longer. That's the power of having a population that's fit, at their playing weight, able to go out and actually live their full life, live their God-given purpose of changing the world with agency to make a difference. So the primary responsibility for me is to get us back on our feet again, so we can go back to work at full speed, be productive as we can as a nation, and allow our country to grow. America is a $500 trillion business, if you count the raw materials under us and all the potential we have. $500 trillion. So I'm not as concerned about our debt or even the amount of money I spend, because if we're spending $2 trillion for a $500 trillion business, you know, it's okay. What we can't afford is to lose the $500 trillion. Build productivity by investing in people, and we will win this game day in and day out. And that's why the single most expensive thing in healthcare is bad quality care. Because you pay someone who's not very good to do a bad job, then you pay someone who's pretty good to fix the bad job, and you pay for all the downstream expenses, and most importantly, you lose the ability of that person to work and engage the country fully. And that is the kind of problem that we cannot tolerate in America. And I do believe with real-time management of patients with their records that they control and with security that they trust, using those records and giving them the companies that they believe can help them with their diabetes or hypertension or their depression or whatever it is that's holding them back from living the full life that they were supposed to be enjoying. That's how we're going to be able to keep this country healthy enough to be able to continue to win in every domain going forward.
So if you think about the last 5 years, we got hit by a pandemic, a total black swan event. ChatGPT happens, generative AI happens, and in some ways, everything we're talking about today, the solutions to a lot of these problems is using AI effectively, right? To fraud, to the physician burnout, there's a lot going on there, to processing payments more effectively, to preemptive care. Everything is all about really deploying AI successfully in different parts of healthcare. So what advice do you have? A lot of the founders in the room are leaning into it, on how they work with the government, how do they think about safety and guardrails, so that we don't have hiccups along the way. So this can actually go, we can accelerate progress in this dimension.
Well, first off, scare us. We need big ideas. Think out of the box with concepts that are rational in terms of their ability to be funded, but big time in terms of their ability to impact people, because we really are here to play. I came from where you're sitting. I'm not going to stay here long. I promised 4 years, right? I want to do this job really well.
We have a term sheet waiting for you after that. Term sheet.
I gotta get my wife to agree to anything. But the goal I have with everyone else that I'm trying to recruit in the government is to do the most we can in 4 years and create a system that when we hand the baton to the next group that comes in, they feel the same way as we feel. None of us are here just to see how things go. And we are moving at lightning speed because the president, I think, appropriately feels that while they're fighting you in yesterday's announcement, you're doing tomorrow's announcement. So we're going to move quickly. We have already in place, in particular in technology, a massive tech transformation initiative. We had at least 500 people in the first floor of Humphreys. Secretary Kennedy and I, with Amy Gleason, we're speaking to the group about how we see this. We want the large companies, the incumbents, to come in and help build the platforms. We want insurgents to be able to come in with business opportunities, predictable timelines, some security that there are fair rules to play with. So they know they actually have an ability to succeed. And what does that do? It drops the dilution they'll experience, builds their valuations, and allows them to recognize a secure long-term future for themselves. We don't want people to flip the things. We're not interested in do the things you need to do to run your businesses, but sustained growth is what we see as an opportunity in this business. And if I was in your shoes, I'd be doubling down on the tech transformation element in all the different ways it can affect us. Yes, fraud, waste, and abuse. Yes, making providers happier in their daily practices and incentivizing them to do the right things. But most importantly, by empowering beneficiaries. We need consumer-facing tools that get people engaged because they will come and they will stay. If you build it, they will come. And I'm confident in that because I've already seen some of the pickups. Even the changes we made to Medicare.gov for open enrollment, which were to put a provider directory in place, which, by the way, we went to private sector companies and said, do this for America. And companies that are often lambasted in the media for taking advantage of the system said, fine, we get that, we understand. We don't want to be the butt of all the jokes. We want to fix the system and be proud leaders of the process. So they gave us their provider directory, which we then could incorporate together and use that to guide beneficiaries to pick better plans for themselves, pick the right doctor and the right network for them to get the care they desire. We're doing the same thing across the board with many other sectors. You should be there as well and be audacious in what you're asking the incumbents for. They need you too if you're in an insurgent space, and they want to play ball and they want to lead, and they're not going to do it by themselves. They need the creative juices, so go work with them. And if you don't have Amy Gleason's cell phone number and home number, I'll share them later on.
Dr. Oz, I really admire the work you and your team are doing. I genuinely believe the decisions you guys are making and the way you are moving the whole system, the way you're partnering with the private sector is going to make a difference. Thank you for joining us today, and appreciate sharing your thoughts.
God bless you all. If you can turn these lights down, you come on up here. You take a picture. We're going to come down to you. We'll get one picture together. You need help? Emma, sit over there. Behave yourself. Or sit on my lap if you want. I was kidding. I was kidding. All right, everyone smile. There we are. It's going to be all over the place, so look happy.
All right.
Thanks, everybody.
Please welcome to the stage Kaledora Kiernan-Linn, co-founder and CEO of Ostium, in conversation with Dasha Burns, the White House bureau chief at Politico.
Hello, everybody. I don't know how I'm supposed to follow that up. We'll see about that. I'm Dasha Burns. I'm the White House bureau chief at Politico. And you might be wondering what a White House reporter is doing here. Well, it turns out with this administration, the idea of decentralized assets, of digital assets, cryptocurrency, stablecoins, that is a huge part of the conversation inside of this administration now. And I get to interview this lovely lady here, Kaledora Kiernan-Linn. She is the co-founder and CEO of Ostium. I want to get a sense from you of what exactly Ostium was trying to solve for. This is kind of an everything market that you've created. You stand at the intersection between traditional finance and decentralized finance. Talk to me about how you came up with this and what's the problem you're solving.
Sure. First of all, thanks for having me. I'm very honored to be here and excited to share the stage with you, Dasha. Ostium came out of a very simple frustration. For most international and sort of global participants in the markets, for most consumers, the way that they can gain access to the US markets is through very centralized, very opaque rails. And actually one of the most predatory parts of sort of the traditional markets, and I'll maybe back up what sounds like a pretty large claim. To paint a picture, if you're outside the US and you want access to US markets, you generally have to go through an offshore broker. So these brokers offer what's called synthetic exposure. They allow you to get price exposure to an asset, be that indices, single name stocks, some commodities that are widely traded here. And these brokers are very opaque. You have to hand over full custody of your assets if you're a consumer in one of these countries to them. And many of them are actually controlled by some of our foreign adversaries. And so the question we asked ourselves was, why isn't there an American company building in this space? Why are we letting, companies outside the US actually benefit the most from the demand for access to these US markets and these global markets? And why are we not building a company here sort of on American values and on, a new tech stack? And so, the way I'll draw, I think, what is hopefully a helpful parallel to stablecoins. In the way that stablecoins enable global market participants to get access to a stable monetary system and to the US dollar. Similarly here, right, I think there's been amazing coalescing in DC over the last, months, year, on recognizing the importance of stablecoins as sort of a conduit for extending the reach of the US dollar. It makes no sense for non-US companies to actually benefit the most and capture all the value from the global demand for the dollar. And I think similarly here, we see this as sort of the next step. There's this global demand for access to US markets, and there should be a US company built on these blockchain transparent rails, and I could talk a little bit more about why it has to be on chain, but sort of built an American company that actually captures, and the US should capture that value from the global demand for US markets.
When I say everything market, you are working with asset classes on the blockchain that I think policymakers haven't thought about, this intersection that we're talking about. So you've got silver, gold, commodities, tokenized stock, other synthetic assets. I mean, can you explain that nexus that you've created?
Yeah, sure. So, Ostium, actually the name means portal or gateway, so is a gateway to these global markets. It is built on these sort of decentralized blockchain rails, and maybe I can speak sort of quickly to why that is. So I guess the first part of that is just the sort of building out a fundamentally better product. In the same way that stable coins enable this sort of global access to the dollar, if you're going to disrupt what is sort of this very, the stablecoin example, these antiquated sort of remittance architectures, usually have to build a 10x better product. And we often say this in startups, like you can't build a 10% better product, a 20% or even 50% product. It really has to be 10x better. And so if you're going to upend sort of an existing industry, you have to build it on what we think is a completely different tech stack, and actually ultimately solves a lot of the problems here. So there's this basically this shadow market for access to US assets internationally, and it's actually quite hard to get a sense for truly how large it is. It's in the tens of trillions in notional volume annually, but because it's so opaque, it's actually quite hard to get sort of like clear numbers, and it also creates a systemic blind spot for the US. So we think it needs to be built on a blockchain, both to solve sort of the product issue and actually build a 10x better product that actually can go and disrupt this existing market, but also to sort of bring the transparency and the auditability that is so critical.
So we talked about the problem you were trying to solve. Who were you trying to solve that problem for?
Yeah, global consumers. So in the same way that a cafe owner in Argentina might want to save and spend in US dollars, and stablecoin's the vehicle for doing that, you might be a trader or a market participant in the Philippines, or you name it, and want access to US markets. That is really the market that we're building for.
When we talk about how the US has started to shift in its policy towards companies like yours, I think there's still a lot of catching up to do in terms of the infrastructure that frankly doesn't exist right now, has not caught up with the innovation that people like you are spearheading. What do you need from Washington, from policymakers, from the administration to unleash more of what you're doing and what your peers are doing in this industry?
Yeah, this is a great question, and I'll stick to one thing to keep it simple. I think the most important thing for a company like ours is developer protections, and this was something that was a key part of the Genius Act that was passed earlier in the year. But for a little bit of context, we are building in decentralized finance, so DeFi, colloquially known. And these are more sort of software businesses than they are traditional financial institutions. And so there are very key protections that actually need to be in place for software developers and developers of these sorts of what we call protocols.
So regulators don't know what to do with you right now.
Yeah, I would say that's one way of framing it. And I would say, yeah, there isn't a super clear, I think, picture of exactly what to do with DeFi today. And I think we've only just gotten, building this technology is very hard. Regulating is even harder. And it takes a while to figure out what, the market often sort of coalesces around a view of what the, appropriate way of doing things should be before there's a clear regulatory framework for things, or these two things kind of happen in tandem. And we've only just gotten in stablecoins, portfolio company of General Catalyst, Circle, has been around for a long time now, and we're only really getting to the point where I think we know what to do broadly with stablecoins, and so I think we're still a little bit of the way out on the DeFi side. So the most important thing to enable the US to actually win in this category and not risk this innovation or founders or these companies moving offshore before there's a clear framework is to just have protections in place for them.
You considered moving offshore, right?
Yeah, we did. We don't offer the product to U.S. consumers today. We're building for a global audience, but we didn't even hire developers in the U.S. in the beginning because we were worried. We started a few years ago, and there was sort of a long reach, jurisdictional reach, and so we didn't feel comfortable hiring people in the U.S. But that's changed now, and we're hiring people and creating jobs in the U.S. So that's good.
Yeah, give a round of applause for that. But that's why policy matters, right? Because it does play into these really important decisions that ambitious, innovative founders like yourself have to think about.
Indeed.
You also have a pretty interesting, unconventional, shall we say, path to where you are today. You went from professional ballerina to blockchain. How did you get there, and how does your past dancing on the stage impact how you think about your work today?
My dance moves don't come in a ton of handy anymore, but I found myself back on a stage somehow.
I mean, Dr. Oz gave us a bit of a show. Maybe we need a little performance here, a little nutcracker for the holidays.
We're working on it. But yeah, so that was my first career. I was a professional ballerina with the Royal Danish Ballet in Denmark. So that was my first job. Ballet was, so.
Tammy.
Thank you. Ballet was, my first love. An outlet for, I guess, all of my excess energy and hyper-focus as a kid. My first sort of big dream, and I guess taught me to, in a sort of a cheesy way, dream really big and then make that happen. A couple things. I guess there's the things that ballet taught me, and then the things that I learned from leaving ballet and starting again in something completely different. So, a lot of the tropes are true. Ballet is very tough. You get used to hearing a lot of no's. You get used to hearing a lot of tough feedback, injuries, mean teachers at a very young age. So you learn how to have to put your ego aside and focus on just getting better every day and coming with the same level of intensity. So kind of the focus, dealing with rejection, having thick skin, which I'm sure you know a lot about. So building thick skin at a young age, I think, is very important, especially when you wind up unexpectedly going down the startup route later on. You got to deal with a lot of no's and a lot of pushback before you sort of hit that escape velocity. And then I would also say there's the piece on the focus side, sort of the long-term focus. You start ballet when you're 3, and you don't start dancing professionally until you're almost 20. So you got to operate on a 10, 15, 20-year time horizon. I think in a society addicted to instant gratification, being able to operate on a decade-long time horizon is a superpower, I'd like to think. And I think all the incredible innovators here today all share that, and I'd like to think we're able to do the same. The second piece, what did I learn from leaving ballet and starting again? I retired from ballet, went back to college in my early mid-20s. Was a bit of a shock when meeting my co-founder, who's over there. First week of freshman fall, back in school, and I think probably many or some of you here with sort of a non-traditional background, you learn how to not see the world as fixed. Like the world is, I think one quality that a lot of founders share, just people trying to change things and disrupt, is like the world is often more malleable than you think. It's not as fixed. And even like systemic problems or an entrenched reality, however you want to characterize it, is not, the world is more malleable than you think. And I think when you've had to kind of remake yourself and try your hand at something completely new, you learn that maybe what's true about you is probably maybe true about the world too.
Maybe something that government can learn a little bit. You can be more malleable. You are a young founder with this unconventional background. There's this dichotomy, I feel like, in this finance space of young innovators like you trying to change things, but in a space that does have a long tradition, that does have a long history. How do you find that juxtaposition? Is it a healthy push and pull? Does it mean you're banging your head against the wall? What have you experienced entering into a world that maybe is not as malleable on the face?
Not to beat the dead horse in the ballet analogy, but ballet is very structured, and as all the classical arts are. So there's a very strict structure, and then you have to kind of find the creativity within it. I think the same is true when you're building in a very, DeFi is very disruptive, but it is so disruptive because it's changing the landscape of something that is so established and also just critical to the functioning of our modern world, which is these financial rails. And so I think finding the creativity or like what is malleable, like what do you need to reimagine? You can't maybe reimagine all levels of the stack always at the same time. Sort of picking the parts where you need to reimagine things and understanding why maybe certain existing parts of the stack exist as they are and the benefit to having them the way they are, I think, is having that sort of discretion or like judgment to differentiate between like what needs to be remodeled and what needs to be changed versus like what is sort of structured and should remain as it is. Hopefully answers your question.
You talked about, back to the ballet metaphor, it's really useful actually. You talked about having the long view, both personally in your pursuit of that passion and also in the pursuit of this company. How do you see this sector and Ostium in a couple years, in 5 years, in 10 years? What's the pipe dream of what this all looks like?
Look, I think blockchains are going to remake our financial infrastructure. It's so clear to me. Look, like blockchains are this amazing tool, and I think maybe we don't talk enough about like how they serve really as this tool for actually changing a lot of the things in the direction that I think regulators would actually be quite aligned with, for more transparency, more sort of self-custody and individual ownership of assets, and sort of they are an incredible tool for solving what are some of the most dire and pressing problems of the existing legacy infrastructure. And maybe if I were to close with one thing on that, or sort of a message, would be, I think there's a lot of discussion around like decentralization and does it bring this instability, or what does it do? Is it make it harder to regulate? It's a really incredible tool for bringing more stability, for bringing transparency and by default auditability. Not auditability that you have to enforce from the top down, but that exists by default in the infrastructure and in the products that we build themselves. So yeah, I think in 10 years from now, I would be shocked if our entire financial system, and it'll happen piece by piece, like the sort of most antiquated, most legacy parts will be remade first, and the places where using blockchain solves a real product problem, like a user problem, will be the places that are first disrupted by blockchain. That's what we're trying to do. I'm gonna talk my own book here, but we're picking what I think is one of the most thorny corners of the traditional markets, which is this global access to these US markets, going through these very centralized, very opaque rails, and trying to remake it with this blockchain infrastructure. And we think that's only gonna happen sort of piecewise going through the whole stack. And I think hopefully we'll all work together really wonderfully on making that possible and making sure the U.S. dominates and wins in that arena, because it's, I mean, so critical. U.S. resilience is, so much of that is tied to our financial infrastructure and making sure that we remain the winners and the leaders. So yeah, let's win.
That's a great note to end on. Let's win, Kaledora. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody.
Please welcome back to the stage General Catalyst CEO and author of Transformation Principles, Hemant Taneja, and the president of General Catalyst Institute, Teresa Carlson.
We're at the end. All right. Wow. Thank you all so much for being here today. I hope you enjoyed hearing from all of these founders and our government leaders. I always get jazzed from just hearing what they're talking about, and I think it just gives us such great perspective here in Washington, D.C. on how we think about, again, deploying capital with the best technologies and the right policies. We can get so much done. So I wanted Hemant, of course, is my co-founder, and was the idea around creating this General Catalyst Institute. And he and I talked a lot about when we you know, almost 2 years ago, I guess, started talking about this, like, what could we do that was different? And I wanted him to come out and talk a little bit about what did he see, what did he come out of this conference learning, and what he'd like for you to take away.
Well, so as I look around the room, I was sort of thinking about what does tonight become? I think tonight should become a movement. There's a lot of founders here, there's a lot of policymakers here, there's some capital allocators here. We're all here because there's a blueprint for US resilience that we care about. And I think as these companies develop and as we help create the right sets of policies that set up the market systems the right way, that's ultimately how we're going to get there. So radical collaboration to make this happen is going to be really essential. And the answer for all of the solutions really is AI. And that's what I think brings together a lot of the founders. People are building in different disciplines, but how do you use technology from the perspective of workforce transformation? How do you use technology from the perspective of resilience and abundance, which is ultimately what AI should be delivering for us? There's a lot of best practices that can be shared from a company building perspective and also from the perspective of developing the right policies, the right market incentives so that these companies can thrive and be the important institutions that bring about change in this next generation. So I think, first of all, congrats for putting this together. Hopefully this will become a longer agenda and a movement, and we all continue to come back together here and share best practices on how this is working and work towards a lot of the agenda that's being set today around broader transformation of all the core services in society.
And one of the things we said, we're bringing the valley to the hill, which is a little bit different, where we really want to bring our founders into Washington, D.C. and the governments around the world so they can understand how do they work, how do they tell their story, how can they make an impact. And I will say, everybody that you all saw on stage today, they, working with venture, working with General Catalyst, they put capital together and did their R&D and developed and created their tools. We heard some amazing stories today, and this is what we need. We need to utilize private capital to put dollars to work. We can't depend on government to do everything. And both of the congressional leaders today, before they left, said, look, we got to work together on how we discuss and decide how we deploy capital in the ways that matter, that makes the U.S. Resilient. And that was really what was about today. And like HT said, I call him HT, so when you like here, I don't call him Hemant all the time, it's HT. But so let's keep this movement going. And the last thing I wanted to share, if we can flip the screen, is Hemant was traveling around the world. He just wrote a new book that's a bestseller. And it's the Transformation Principles. And I wanted him to share kind of his takeaways on the Transformation Principles. And after that, we're going to go enjoy ourselves, have a reception, and socialize a little bit.
Thanks, Teresa. So I'll be brief because I don't want to be between you all and drinks. So look, when ChatGPT happened and generative AI work started becoming, it was clear that that's going to be a diffusion of technology across all key disciplines all at the same time. And you think about the evolving capabilities of those technologies, which we still don't fully understand as they're getting smarter and smarter, the AI capabilities. And you think about the geopolitics and how that's changing the market opportunity and the need for resiliency. It was very clear, and I've said this a few times, that we're going into an era of peak ambiguity. And we have to go innovate and transform with AI in the midst of that ambiguity. And when you find yourself in those situations, the only thing you have to lean on to find the true north is your principles. So what we did was we took a step back and thought about what are the kinds of principles that have helped founders create companies that become enduring institutions. And our strong belief is that enduring institutions lean on the flywheel of profit and purpose. They're not focused on just shareholder value. They're not focused on just being impact, but truly is about profit and purpose, working in tandem with each other from an implementation standpoint. And so we essentially wrote a playbook for ourselves, for our founders, to think about as we go down this path for the next decade. You know, at GC, we'll probably deploy a few $100 billion in the next 20 years into this problem of transformation with AI. We better have our act together. And if we're intentional about it, we can actually make a difference in how technology, again, drives resilience, abundance, and the transformation of work. Those are all sort of key challenges ahead of us. So hopefully you get a chance to take a look at it, and happy to discuss any key insights that you may have on how we go about this transformation journey as well. But thank you all for joining today.
And it's a really practical guide. It's a very practical guide about how you think about this. So I would encourage you all to read it. And I'll just say again, I appreciate everybody coming. This is our first inaugural. Please give us feedback. The only way that we make this better is to hear from you. And again, let's remember the goal. Let's put together the right technology with the right policies with the right capital. You can do that in any order that you need, but you got to get all three of them to really drive to the right model. And I will say, I think we have an administration right now that's really willing to work with us on the right policies. So let's go tackle this together. Thank you all for coming. Look forward to seeing you at the reception. Thank you.